linda mi negrita, tan linda cuando sonríe, tan linda cuando me besa y cuando me abraza, eso es caché. ¿Con qué ganará Matilde? No me estoy portando mal.
Good evening. Welcome to Living Arts. I'm your host, Jackie Suarez. Thank you for tuning in. I hope everyone survived Hurricane Sandy and is doing well. This evening we're going to be talking about Cuban music. We have two terrific guys here to talk about that with us. We have Ed Castañeda with Havana, New York, Jesse Herrero of Sonsublime. Guys, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're doing very well.
Thanks for coming up. I've wanted to do this segment for a while, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity. You and I know each other actually through my stepfather, Tony Leon, who's been in the music business for quite some time. So give our audience a little background on Havana, New York, and a little bit of the history of that.
Well, I'll tell you how Havana, New York got started. Actually, it's his fault.
He comes to blame.
There you go.
For a few years, my wife and I used to go out to the mall and on 87, and we'd see on the highway this marquee for a club, and we'd see all these Latin bands, that were performing. And I think we went by this sign for like 5 years, and we said, oh, one night we got to go. So one night we actually did go. And it's a nice club, there's a dance floor, they have a live band, and it's sort of like a cabaret, little tables around. I don't know if you've been there, the Westgate Lounge in Nyack.
Oh, no, I have not been there.
Okay. Well, after going there for a couple of weeks, one night we saw in the marquee, Sonsublime. And I said, okay, well, interesting name, Sublime. I said, oh, we'll see. So we went in, and the DJ's playing, and they're setting up, and finally they start playing. And wow, everything came back to me. This music that I was hearing and dancing to. It's the music that I grew up with. See, my family's from Cuba, and what I was hearing was that music, the music from my high school days in Union City in the 70s. I don't know if people are familiar with Union City, but in the 70s it was like Little Havana.
Okay,
it was
New
a
Jersey.
huge, a huge immigrant Cuban population. And every month there'd be at least a couple of dances. And at these dances they'd have live music, live bands. Back then DJs weren't popular. So, they'd have 2 or 3 bands, and there'd be about 500 to 800 people, So this is part of what I had heard, as I was growing up, like Estaragón, Celia Cruz, Benny Moré, and here was this music at this nightclub that I was at.
So did the two of you start Havana, New York together?
No. Well, the reason I say it was his fault because he is what sparked it.
Okay.
He was selling a CD that night. I bought a CD and says, "Oh, I have 2 more CDs and they're available on the internet." When I went home, I looked them up and I bought them and loved them also. So we started following this band around wherever they would play, and we kind of became friends. And he introduced me to other Cuban bands here in New York City. And at the time, I was working at Channel 13 in their internet department, and kind of doing what I'm doing now. I was promoting their shows like Nature, and their music show, the performance shows, and all that. So I said, wait a minute, I could do this for these bands. They really need some exposure. So not long after that, I put together a website, and I wrote an article, the Cuban music that was going on, the Cuban music renaissance, not too shortly before the Afro-Cuban All-Stars came to New York City, and they had performed, and they sparked this
this revival almost.
Revival, of Cuban music. So, little by little, the website it kept growing, and people started contacting me. I formed an email list and started promoting on the social networking sites like MySpace and Facebook. So it kind of became a community, and after a while, not only musicians started contacting me, but artists and writers and poets. So the website kept growing. And,
So what do you think when you started doing this? I guess it's a way to keep the tradition of Cuban music alive, and also to highlight some of the artists that were still in the business and keep kind of attention on it. But I wanted to give our audience just a little, if you were to put together a little synopsis of how Cuban music, well, first of all, how Cuban music immigrated over here to the U.S. Because, I mean, if you wanted to do like a little history of it for our audience, by all means, take us there.
Well, Cuban music has been around since colonial times. It's a mixture of Spanish music from Spain, which also has some Arabic, a lot of Arabic influences, especially in the singing, in the chants, and then you have the African, all those rhythms and drums and everything, and kind of came together in Havana around that time, and they kind of got exported to South America and the U.S. and well, wasn't the U.S. yet; it was the colonies. But it went north and south and west, and also back to Europe and Africa. And there are many other influences also on Cuban music, classical music from Europe. That's where you get the introduction of violins and flutes and cellos and violas into early Cuban music, which is still around today in a form of Cuban music called charanga music.
Now, what is that exactly?
Well, I'll leave that to him. He can describe it because his band is the Charanga Orchestra. But basically, in a nutshell, Cuban music is Western music. When you talk about Western music, you have to talk about Cuban music. You can't just talk about jazz and rock and roll, because Cuban music was around before jazz and rock and roll and influenced both of them and other American music. In New Orleans, before there was jazz, there was Cuban music. One of the most popular musical forms was a danzón, and it was all the rage in New Orleans, and that sort of influenced all the musicians that were in that time and around.
Right, well, definitely the percussion part of it and the instruments that were being used and the congas. Yeah. I mean, definitely made their way over here into our music, and it's even dance music.
Sure. Everything from the Beatles to 50s rock and roll. There's a lot of songs that have that cha-cha beat in it. Even the 70s with disco music. Disco music is essentially cha-cha-cha. If I was a dance teacher for a couple of years, and it's the same, pretty much the same basic step. 1, 2, cha-cha-cha, tap, step, 2, 3, 4.
Well, look at this. You learned so much about a person. I had no idea. Arthur Murray, or was it a private lesson?
No. It was a spin-off of Dale Dance Studios called Shelley's New York Hustle. Yeah, and I actually went there for lessons to learn how to do the hustle. I knew how to do Latin because my mother taught me.
Right.
At a very young age when I was 13. So I had seen the hustle, and I said, I want to learn how to do this. So I ended up in this dance school. One night, my teacher was Spanish. She was from Puerto Rico. And she says, "You're Latin, right?" I go, "Yeah, I'm Cuban." She says, "Oh, I'm going to put on a Latin record, and we started dancing. And then the owner of the dance studio saw it, and he approached me and says, "How would you like to be a dance teacher?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I don't know anything about teaching." He said, "We'll train you." So they put me in this intensive training thing,
Well, that was
So
cool.
that's how I got
So you
into.
got into that opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, I think what's important to note is that there was a period of time, obviously, when Castro took over Cuba or nationalized the music, the clubs, and the country, basically. Many of the artists that were there immigrated here to Miami and various places, and that the culture of, I guess, the what is the big club over there, the
Tropicana.
The Tropicana.
right, exactly.
The
So
Tropicana,
you had all
yeah.
these wonderful artists that came and started living over here, and I think they still are performing here for the most part, or have kept that tradition alive here. So when you say, I mean, well, you were born in Santiago, right?
I was born in Santiago de Cuba, and funny thing was, I came to the United States at the age of 13, and I discovered the real Cuban music on the Hudson.
Really?
Yeah, because as a child, I listened to a lot of Cuban music in Cuba, and enjoyed it very much. You listen to like the top 10, the Benny Morés, the Aragon, and all those big bands, very popular. Then you come here as a child, and you then get involved with the rock and roll, because this is the kind of what you do when you are a teenager, coming to the United States, especially in the 60s. And then one day, all this music just came back to me and said, wait a minute, this is where I came from. And it was so beautiful. That's why I always said I learned Cuban music. I found Cuban music on the Hudson, which is a kind of a profound thing to say, but
Right, because you got kind of into it. I mean, when I was growing up, there was definitely Spanish music in the house.
Yes.
But I wanted no part of that.
right.
And it wasn't until much later that I was like, who is Tito Rodriguez, and who is
Exactly.
this, and who is this, and I'm playing it, and I'm like, I got a taste for it, and
You
I'll
know,
definitely, it's playing in the house now, and it's a little bit more a part of my life.
Right. The music and musicians. I mean, the music has been here for longer than Fidel Castro. Longer than any other governments in Cuba. Here I'm talking about here in the States, around the world.
Well, it's funny, just reading about it. If you
Right.
talk about Cuban music, people are referencing Desi Arnaz.
That's your
That was because of TV. That was popularized,
Sure,
right?
sure,
So
absolutely.
people are like, you can't talk about Cuban music without talking about Desi and some of the people that,
Right.
people are familiar with,
The big mambo, big jazz bands like Jose Curbelo, who had a band, one of the creators of this style of music, the big band sound. We're talking about 17 musicians on a bandstand, and this is Desi Arnaz, the Babalu, style. Which, by the way, Desi Arnaz was not the creator of the Babalu. We're gonna, we're gonna have to
set that straight.
we will have to do another show to explain that. But
Okay.
Desi Arnaz was a genius, One thing that I do want to, for the record, Cuban music or Latin music in general, it became so strong in the United States and so popular, and I have to say that especially because of the problem in Cuba, the isolation because of socialism and so forth, and the migration of Cubans to the United States and the blockade. The one group that continued to support Cuban music from even back in the 60s and from 59 on, the Puerto Ricans. The Puerto Ricans have
You're
been
welcome. No.
well, the Puerto Ricans have been I have to say the number one supporter in the United States, particularly in New York. The ones who not only since the Castro, when the this isolation became effective, I shouldn't say effective, but it became it was on, and then you couldn't go to Cuba, musicians could not come here.
Right.
Until recently, and so the style of music sort of like stayed here, the same sound from the 50s all the way till about 80s, and then things started,
Evolving.
evolving. But what I'm trying to say is that the Puerto Ricans gave it the biggest support and continue to support this music until today, which has been great, you know.
Right. As I was doing some just the background for this interview, I read that some of the people that were leaving Cuba actually went to Puerto Rico, which I wasn't aware of for some reason. I thought I don't know why I didn't realize that before, because I guess I never heard of any Cubans that were migrating to Puerto Rico. But talk to me a little bit about the marriage of salsa or Latin jazz from Cuban music.
Well, I think E. Castañeda was describing, the Cuban music and the marriage. I have to say that everything you hear, especially when you hear the name salsa music, is a more of a commercialized name to identify Latin music. Forget about Cuban music for a moment, but anything related to dance music. Okay, so Cuban music is the foundation of the song, which is a style of Cuban music born on the eastern province of Cuba. This is a style of music that started in el monte, in the countryside,
the mountains.
in the mountains, in the mountains. You have Cuarteto de Mayarí, Trio Los Matamoros. Those are the people that you have to credit this sound, and from there, everything started branching out. And what today, the so-called salsa, this is what it is. So when you ask me about the marriage between that and
Right, it's more like parent and child.
Exactly, it all comes to one, pretty much.
Okay, now you started Sonsublime a long time ago.
I started Sublime
Sublime
in New York in 1975.
Wow.
Yeah, a long time ago. This is after my discovery of Cuban music in the Hudson.
So were you listening to Spanish music at all, or were you following it, or you were more Americanized and you were listening to popular music?
Oh no! By that time, I was 100% Cuban. Salsero or whatever you want to call it. By that time, I left the rock and roll music to the side, but I always went back to it because rock and roll music is also an inspiration to me. It's, if you're a musician, you need to know about jazz, rock and roll, blues, and so forth. But I became very, very much involved in the way you do this as when you are about 17 years old, going to the clubs, and I will stand in front of the stage watching the Ray Barretos, the Tito Puente, those icons of the music that was playing at that time here in New York. And this is where, these are the people that are sort of responsible for that word salsa. Celia Cruz is one of the people also very responsible, and probably one of the ones, the first one that used that word salsa. But I started making friends with a lot of the, so-called the top notch of this type of music. The Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, Celia Cruz, Hector Lavoe. Hector Lavoe was a personal friend of mine. And at that time, I met a gentleman by the name of Pupi Legarreta. Pupi is a legendary Pupi Legarreta. He's a Cuban musician that masters 3 instruments. He masters the violin, the flute, and the piano. He was also a member of the Fania All-Stars. So this is in the early 70s, 72. And in 73, he approached me, and he heard me singing. He goes, I could use a voice like yours. I concentrated and sort of dedicated my style of singing to charanga music.
And for those in the audience that don't know, if you wanted to put a definition to charanga, what would you say?
Oh, charanga music is a style of Cuban music that it was really formed. It was put together at the turn of the 18th century, and it was played by a combination of Africans but Haitians that lived in Cuba, and it was the instrumentation, like E. Castañeda was saying, a lot of the influence from Europe, like the violins and the viola, the cello, and the piano, because at the time they didn't have it was more of a quartet of, the instrumentation was 2 violins, a flute, and the contrabass, a contrabajo, the bass, and there were no vocals. And this type of music was performed by a lot of Haitians with instrumentation that came from Europe, and the Haitians brought it into Cuba during the slavery and
the rebellion.
Exactly. This type of music was used primarily for the high elite society, ballroom music.
Right.
So even though it was
chamber music, right? I guess.
Chamber music, but with a beat that you could dance to. Okay.
Yeah, so it's more like in a dance hall.
Exactly,
yeah.
And that's where the danzonetes, came from. Then it evolved, over the years. The Cubans they say, okay, they put more rhythm section, like the conga, the timbal, and then the güiro, which is the güiro is the instrument that you scratch.
It's hollow on the inside. It has the ridges on the outside.
Which is probably the backbone of this music. Also, one of the backbones. It's almost the salt to the food. You take the salt out, and food is not going to taste as good. You take the güiro out, and believe me, this music is not going to sound the same. So now you have these instrumentations that actually originated in Africa. The conga drums, and it became. It continued to grow from a 4-5 piece band to now 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 people, Okay,
so how many people are in your band?
My band, we have 10 people.
10 people, okay.
I love charanga music, obviously, because this is the type of music that I play. But the love to the music also, for me and for people that I talk to about this type of music, like yourself, is that I love the traditional sound. It's very important to me to continue with this format. Cuba, charanga music has evolved. Now you hear charanga bands with trumpets, trombones. You hear a lot of more lead singing, one person singing along, inspirational singing, if you will, and that has come out of the mold. The traditional charanga music is, with violins, viola, cello, flute, and vocals. One thing about the vocals, when they added the vocal voice to this charanga style of music, there was one singer, and in those days the technology wasn't there, the microphones and the PA systems. So you had this is the type of music that was played in a ballroom for the elite, and you have 300 people in a ballroom, and you have a band with one singer, and then all these instruments behind you, and they couldn't hear the guy. So someone came with the idea, said, why don't we have 2 guys singing? So that would add volume to the vocal.
So do you have another vocalist that's with your band?
We are 3 vocalists.
3 vocalists. So, unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time. I wanted Ed to give our audience a way to contact you through your website and maybe the next event that you're going to be having, to let them know, well, basically just direct them to your site.
Well, yeah, they can go online to HavanaNewYork.com. You spell out New York, and there's no spaces, .com. And on the homepage, it tells you what's going on here in the city, and also in Miami. There's stuff going on there.
Okay, so you cover those.
Also, yeah, and there's a button that you can click on and send me your
to get emails.
email address, and I'll put you on my email list.
Okay, terrific. So Jesse, also tell us how to contact you and the information. And you have a performance that's coming up in January. Tell us about that.
That's right. We're going to be at the Westgate Lounge. That's the club where Ed found us. And this is a very nice club. It's local. It's not too far, over the bridge, Tappan Zee Bridge.
Okay.
And it's a lot of people go there.
So they can go to your website.
January 5th, Sonsublime will be performing at the Westgate Lounge. Your audience can find out where Sonsublime will be performing by visiting sonsublime.com.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both for coming. This has been very interesting. We're going to have a clip of you performing at SOBs, so can't wait to see that.
Okay.
Thank you guys for tuning in. To catch old episodes, go to our YouTube channel, Living Arts in Westchester. Hit us up on our website. Thank you for tuning in. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.